Hello, everybody. I am this evening for tonight's Saturday night art stream. I'm going to be working on making this itsy bitsy sketch of a monument in a city square into an actual full size. Oh, what is this scuzziness from my desk that just fell on here? Yuck. Into an actual full-sized illustration. This is a rather good-sized format. It's 11 by 14 and a half is how the math worked out. I had to buy slightly larger paper than normal so that I could still have my nice little taped off margins. I think I'm going to pull my camera back ever so slightly. Please bear with me for a second. Just because, sorry, my little camera arm is not the most cooperative thing that was ever in existence. That's slightly better. Okay. So, since this is an image of a city square and we've got a lot of architecture and we want to try to keep that looking as correct as we possibly can, then we're going to need to lay out a perspective grid. And I've talked about doing this method before on some of these streams, and this time I'm going to actually show you that since this is something that's pretty huge, and doing a traditional perspective grid where I just place a dot somewhere and then use the somewhere off to the side and then use the ruler to make the perspective lines would be really difficult with this because the perspective points would have to be really far away from the paper with it at this size for everything to not be super warped. So this time I'm going to use mathematical perspective, which you may not be able to see too well, but I've got a bunch of itty bitty little marks on the side here. Those are every 1/4 inch I have going down either side of my paper. So what we're going to do is that on this side, whoa, sorry, goodness, I'm a disaster. I'm sorry. Smacking my camera, smacking my microphone. Good grief. Who let me do this? So on this side, I'm going to start at every 1/4 inch. And I'm going to measure up from every 1/4 inch over to this side, where I'm going to measure up to every 1/2 inch. So every time over here, I'm going to a 1/4. I'm going to jump up to a 1/2. Over here, 1/4, jump up another 1/2. You'll see the effect this makes as I get going. And it's more difficult to explain verbally than once you see it start happening, it'll make sense. So over on my left, I'm starting down here at the first 1/4 inch mark. And over on my right, I'm going to go up to a 1/2 inch mark. I'm going to put my first perspective line very faintly. I'm working all in regular pencil lead this time because this isn't going to end up being a color piece. So unlike per usual when you see me working on comic pages where I do my blue pencils underneath and then ink on top because I can drop the blue out in Photoshop, the colors are probably going to end up actually being on this if I do the color traditionally. So I need to be able to erase my pencils completely or as completely as possible. So blue is really difficult to do, and also the blue pencil is kind of waxy, so it's not good to try to color over, especially if you're going to use a wet medium. So I'm just going with traditional pencil in my very old and well-worn Staedtler mechanical pencil holder. All right, anyway, so again, I'm going to go up 1/4 and then up a 1/2 on the right. 1/4 on the left, 1/2 on the right. 1/4 on the left, 1/2 on the right. 1/4 on the left, 1/2 on the right. And I'm starting at the bottom as if my horizon line is on the very bottom because this is supposed to be like, it's a monument, you're looking up at it. It's supposed to be kind of a worm's eye view thing. 1/4 to 1/2. So you can see what's happening here is that I'm getting a nice, pretty gradual build up from this side over to this side, as if I have a vanishing point somewhere way the heck over here, which I don't because it would have to be really far away for that to work. 1/4 on this side, 1/2 on this side. And I can just kind of keep trucking along like this. And it still takes a little while. It's not, I mean, doing pretty much any perspective is a little bit tedious. So there's that. But this is going to be a lot more accurate and honestly a lot easier than trying to lay it out on the floor or tack it to the wall and get the longest ruler that you have and draw your perspective. Whoops, my ruler tried to slip there. Draw your perspective line like halfway and then try to extend it without losing the angle. And it's just, it's just not good. There's a few other alternatives, of course, that aren't necessarily quite this old school. Because another option would be making your perspective grid fairly small and then blowing it up on the computer or on the photocopier to be the size that you need it to be. That's one option. Also, a lot of people just make their perspective grids on the computer in the first place and then print them out at whatever size they need them and light box them, or they print them in blue line, which again wouldn't work for this particular application because I'm going to be doing traditional colors on this, but light boxing, that would totally be an option. If anybody's joining late and has questions about what the heck I am doing, please feel free to leave a comment and I will re-explain. I don't mind at all. So now, as you can see, I have reached the upper corner of as I scoot down into the frame, I've reached the upper corner here, but I still have this whole section in which there is no perspective. Is that a problem? Well, I mean, kind of, sort of. Now, there is a way to continue your mathematical perspective across this upper edge, but it's not as straightforward, and I'm going to be totally honest with you, I don't remember how to do that. I think you have to be better at math than I really am in order to pull that one off. So, because that's like actual trigonometry. Don't ask me to do actual trigonometry. That's not going to work. All right, so I'm going to take a piece of scrap paper, which I very frequently have kicking around for tightening up my brushes, and also just because they're handy to have. And I'm going to extend this line to continue measuring. So I'm going to keep marking. I guess I only need to mark every ½ inch on this since that's where I'm going here. That's all I need for this side is ½ inches. I think I still need quite a few of them. I'm probably not going to extend my grid all the way up into the very upper corner because there's not much up there. It's just going to be sky. So if I leave a little bit of space, that's really not the end of the world. I'm sorry if this is kind of dull and technical. I think that sometimes these little technical tricks are actually really interesting, and maybe they're not super interesting to everybody, but even on stuff that I don't know anything about, I always like learning these weird little tips and tricks of the trade. I just find it fascinating how much goes into things that you don't necessarily ever see or think about or anything like that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up in the corner here my piece of scrap paper. Oop. With the edge of my paper, the edge of my image, I should say. I'm going to try to make sure it's as straight as I can get it, because if it's not straight, that's going to cause me some grief. And I'm just going to tape this little extension on there. But this is low tack drafting tape. It should rip right off without damaging the paper. That's the theory anyway. As with any type of tape, the longer you leave it on, the tackier it gets. So you don't want to let it sit for too long. You're going to regret it. right, so now I can just keep extending this. And of course I don't have to draw all the way up to my piece of scrap. I just have to draw my lines to the edge of the picture plane. I'm gonna scoot this down so you can see what I'm doing. As you can see, I'm meeting up these lines, these little marks up here on my little scrap extension. And I'm getting close to the end of what I'm realistically gonna worry about on this, because I'm getting close to where the corner of the image is, where it's basically just gonna be basically just, oh, I lost my place. Dang it. Started talking and I lost my place. There we go. Where it's basically just going to be sky. So you're not really going to need this perspective grid. And I'm all about cutting out unnecessary labor. All right. I'm not going to worry about this corner because we're not really going to be using this side of the perspective grid for that corner. But as you can see, now I have one set of lines, and these are actually pretty extreme. I kind of want the other side to be a little bit more shallow. I'm looking at more of like this type of way more shallow one. So if I go, so what I'm going to need to do, I can't use the same scheme that I did on this first side, because if I go 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch going from right to left, then I'm going to end up with this also fairly extreme angle by the time I get to the top, which means that the corner of something is going to be this really sharp kind of corner, which would not look natural anymore. There's this thing where if you get too far outside the edge of a perspective grid, that things start to warp and the illusion doesn't hold anymore. So because you're no longer seeing it the way your eye would. You're seeing it in this really weird, like wacky funhouse kind of way, which is not what we want. So I'm going to have to make this side a little less extreme. So thinking about how I want to do this, I think what I'm going to do is if I go in between, because I actually don't even want it a little less extreme, I want it a lot less extreme. So I'm going to go slightly cross-eyed here, marking off 16ths, or no, not 16ths, sorry, 8ths. I'm not that insane yet. I'm marking off 8ths instead of quarters, which, since I already have my quarters, will only take me but a moment. Trying to remain as precise as I can. Because I will show you again in my sketch what I'm going for here as far as the perspective situation goes. So my perspective in my little sketch is that this side, which is what this grid is going, this side of the grid that I have so far is going to, is a little bit more extreme. And then this side, the front of the monument, is a lot closer to being straight on. So we need a much shallower change in perspective over there. So we're going to go from a quarter on the right to 3/8 on the left, which is going to be a little bit trickier to not lose track of. But hopefully I can manage. Oh, actually, I'm looking at it now and I already know that that's not going to work. Sometimes you got to do stuff. And as soon as you start doing it, you realize, no, wait, that was a bad call. A will let me redo that. So without destroying too much of my grid here, just very carefully come in and erase those. That's still looking like it's going to be a little too extreme by the time I get up to the top. Rather than carrying this on for too long and then ending up with much wailing of and gnashing of teeth as I get there, I'm just going to nip that right in the bud. All right, so proportionally, what's going to be an even smaller step is if I go from 1/2 inch to 5/8. So on this side, I'll go 1/2. On the right, I'm starting at 1/2 inch. And on the left, I'm going up to 5/8. And that's going to be tricky to not lose my place. But I think I can manage those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry if this is not the most riveting stream you've ever seen, but you should see the effect starting to happen here. 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can see how that is going to be a much shallower, much more gradual kind of perspective. Like this vanishing point, my left-hand vanishing point is fairly close, just out of frame over here. My right-hand vanishing point is much farther away. So another 1/2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm not, while I'm doing this, which is really not the most riveting thing ever, 1, 2, I'm going to talk about what this is for. So this is for a project that I'm a part of called City Builder Platinum Edition. City Builder is a gaming resource book that Skirmisher Publishing came out with, many years ago now. And it's a really cool thing because it is just about, like, what would you find in a city? It's really easy to just constantly send your characters, like send your players to, the tavern, and that's like the one place they go in town. But there's so much more to cities than just a tavern. And so if you need help thinking about what else might be in the city, or just like, okay, well, maybe you can think that these other places exist, but like, what's something they're going to do there? Like, what is the point of them going to these different places? I lost my place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, what kind of people would they meet there? Like, what kind of goods or services or anything else would they encounter? And it just goes really deep into all of this much richer world building. And it does it in a really, in a generic system agnostic way so that you can apply it to pretty much anything you want to. And I really like the fact that you can even apply it to writing. I think it's actually a great resource for fantasy writers in addition to gamers. Don't mind me as I pause periodically to count. So they came out with this book originally quite a while ago called City Builder. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I had some squashy marks there. And it's been one of their best sellers pretty much forever. But now it's getting redone because this is probably one of the earliest books they ever put out as a company. And Skirmisher does, not that anything that they ever produced was not good, but they just have gotten to a whole nother level with years of experience. They're just publishing on a whole nother level, and they can make things look so much better and be just a better all-around product. City Builder Classic is already a pretty great product, but they're punching everything up, making it all a lot nicer. And that includes new content and new artwork, which is what I'm working on. Big surprise. And so one of the things I'm doing is making new chapter headings for all the different chapters. They used to have like classical paintings for their chapter headers, but now I'm working on a series of original illustrations. That was the first stretch goal, which was unlocked, which was just to have all these new illustrations. But in addition to that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm also doing this cool illustration, which it's for higher level backers. There's going to be this picture of this monument. This one, kind of, sort of. It's going to look a little different from this, but we'll get there. And it'll have the names of higher level backers on it, which I forget the exact dollar amount. I want to say it's like, I know one of them is $500 level backers who get to like make their own place and all this other really cool stuff. But there's one other backer level just below that, but I can't remember it offhand. I'll have to pull the campaign up. I will put it in the description if you're watching this later. Which, if any of my Skirmisher cohorts are watching and you want to drop a link in the comments, you go for it. All right, we're getting there. But anyway, yeah, it's on Kickstarter for a little while yet. I think we still have like, like over 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks left in this campaign still. And we've been just killing it with hitting stretch goals and unlocking all sorts of new content, new places, which is really exciting. Some of these are really cool places I'm really looking forward to having in the book. All right, so again, up in this corner here is just, it's just sky. I'm not going to worry about it's sky. There's nothing up there. It's clouds. The clouds I don't need to sweat the perspective. But as you can see now, this side is a much shallower perspective than this side, which is much sharper. And even right like this corner right up here in the very edge, I'm kind of like pushing the bounds. Something right there would look a little bit sharp. But thankfully what I'm going to be working on is mostly right in the middle here. It's not going to be as big an issue. So without further ado, now that I have my very complicated perspective grid, lots of many, many tiny little lines, which now you know how to do mathematical perspective. You just keep using one interval on one side and the other interval on the other side, and you just keep those consistent the whole way through. And you'll end up, because whatever the larger side is getting consistently larger, it recreates the illusion of having your perspective points. I'm having a hard time putting into words why this works or how this works. Somebody who's better at math and geometry can explain how or why it works, but you saw it work, so now you know it works. This is why Amanda's not an art professor. All right, so now I'm going to take my sketch, and I did get some feedback on the sketch that we want to pull out a little bit, so it's not going to end up being quite this big. It's not going to fill up quite as much of this space. I'm going to have that off to the side where I can look at it while it's just out of frame here, sitting next to my desk, so that I can keep glancing at it while I'm trying to knock in the basic proportions of this beast. But yeah, City Builder is really great. I'm really excited that I get to be a part of the reboot of it, the Platinum Edition, as it's being called. Because the original edition was made before I was working with Skirmisher. That predates my involvement in the company by a few years. So I'm excited I get to be a part of it now. All right, so following those perspective lines, making a little base for this. I'm trying to pull it out a little bit so you can see a little bit more of what's going on around it. Okay. And I'm almost certainly going to go back over these with an actual straight edge later to make sure they're not super wonky. But when I'm just knocking forms in, I don't like to use the straight edge right away because I feel like I kind of get a little bit stiff. If I do that, I can always correct these later. I feel like that's still a little bit on the fat side. We're going to make this just a wee bit skinnier. I'll probably make the base just a wee bit skinnier too. And I'm not sweating too much if I erase some of my grid there. There's still enough of it around that I can still have points to anchor to. It's roughly the center there, because I need to find the center of my little triangular top here. Which also, I'm going to draw the inside of this rectangular prism here and find where the center is by following my perspective lines. Center is roughly there-ish. So if that's coming right up through here, this needs to go from here to there. Yay! Geometry. If anyone is curious what I just did, and didn't follow it because I went too fast, just let me know in the comments and I'll go back over it slowly. I think that came out slightly wonky though. I think my line wasn't quite straight, so I gotta adjust that ever so slightly. It's a little wonk. Came out a wee bit wonky. Yeah, that's more like it. Could tell it just looked a little off. Yeah, that's looking better. That looks much better. Okay. But yeah, basically rather than just fudging this pyramid topper to the obelisk, I actually figured out in perspective, using perspective and geometry, where the actual center of that pyramid would be so that I could have my sides going to it in perspective and it wouldn't look ridiculous. So now I can erase all that because those are all guidelines I don't need anymore and they're just making things cluttered and confusing. But there's a nice little top to an obelisk now. I am going to go through and adjust the bottom here. You know, I'm sure there are some people who are a little bit more confident in perspective and composition and everything who don't need to spend so much time noodling around with getting everything just so, but I'm not one of those people. I'm not that confident. I spend a lot of time noodling. Okay. Those are a little wonky. This one, more like this. straighten out, you. These ones are supposed to be tapered up. These are supposed to be straight up and down. They were going wonky the other way. Okay, so I have my basic shape of the obelisk in now. I did pull back a little bit, and I pulled back a little bit, and I made it a little more dramatic. Because if I can be dramatic, I'm probably going to. That top's a little more dramatic. The angle's a little more dramatic than I had in the original sketch, because, I don't know, I think it looks more fun. Sometimes my sketches end up with more energy and more drama than what happens in the pencils, and that always makes me sad. And then sometimes the pencils end up with more energy and drama than are in the sketch, and that's when I feel very happy. I'm pleased with myself. All right, so over here, we're going to have, back over here, we're going to have some buildings. I'm not going to get, I kind of just want to make sure I'm getting these basic shapes in right now, and we can add some details to them in a minute. But over here's a building. That's a wonky line. That's not going where it needs to. Straighten back up, wonky line. And over here, very dramatic building. Down here, we're going to put kind of a lower building over here. Something short. Actually, I don't like the sloped roof on it because that's making me dizzy. I'm going to do something a little different. It's going to have a straight side. And I don't like ending that. It's kind of tangenty. All right. I will figure out what I'm doing eventually. I promise you. I'm sorry. All right. It's going to have similar to what I already had over there. We're going to have some little gables. Some kind of building. I feel like it's too close to the monument, though. I don't know. I might still noodle with that. I'm not sure if I like it where it is. We're going to have some a little lower, like awning or vendor stall or something down here. I'm going to have people down here as well, so those are going to have to get knocked in. Let's see. We want some other building off in the distance. A few rows back or so. Maybe this one has cute little awnings too. Yeah, I'm still not digging what this building's doing. I don't like it. I'm going to change that. More of those cute little awning buildings back here. Cute little windows. Have another building kind of poking out over here. So this looks like it is in the middle of a city with things going on around it. And then like back here a ways, we've got a larger building. I don't want it quite that close to the edge of this one. I'm gonna give a little bit of space. Yeah, that's a little better. Knock that back a little bit. This is somewhere further back. We've got another building with some neat little tower structures and that sort of thing. So yeah, just kind of building up this space in the back so that it does feel like a city with lots of things going on. And now, and up there is just going to be sky. So now down here, I'm going to put in some people. So the idea is if you're following this perspective line, there is a mosquito sitting right, look at that. He's climbing on my finger. What a bold little monster. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. Look at that. Jerk. Get out of here. Anyway, perspective. So the idea is that if you follow this line, that a person's head then would be like right about at the, if you followed this line, this is how tall he would get if he were over here. So a person's head would be like right on the level with the bottom of this obelisk. So you'd have to look up to read pretty much any of it, but you'd be, you know, right on eye level with this middle tier here is the idea. What time is it? It's 9:38, and we've got most of this blocked in. I'm going to block in some figures, populate this scene. He's going to be over here. I don't actually want anybody really in front of the monument. I feel like that I don't really want to be blocking any of it, so we're just not going to do that. I'm going to keep everybody kind of back a little bit. The problem is that people like looking at other people. They like looking at faces. And so if I put people in front of the monument, that's what people are going to look at. They're no longer going to be looking at what's on here. They're going to be looking at the people. So the people have to stay kind of vague figures that are not looking at the camera. They're going to distract you. You won't be looking at this anymore. This will totally not be the focus anymore. It's just kind of how it is. Humans like looking at each other. We can't help it. We really, really like to look at each other. And these won't actually all necessarily be human because this is for a fantasy setting project. So some of these might be, you know, elves or halflings or gnomes or whatever else, dwarfs, but either way, I don't want to be putting orcs. Yep, there could be orcs there. Hey, Bryce is 3/4 lengths. I guess if it was a half human, half halfling, that would be a 3/4ling. Bryce is here. Now there's commentary. I don't know if Bryce has Twitter, but I was complaining about the fact on Twitter today. I was complaining about the fact that I have to figure out how the world clock function on my phone actually works because somebody's moving to the other side of the freaking world. And I want to make sure that if I'm trying to talk to him, it's not when he's asleep. So, although to be fair, he's actually not my only friend who's planning. It is 12 hours ahead. I realized that the region of China that my friend Bryce is moving to is exactly 12 hours ahead of the East Coast, which is pretty convenient because then I just have to look at the clock and go, yeah, it's this, except the opposite. All right, so now I'm just kind of going around and tightening this up. Oh, I'm out of frame. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not helpful. And actually, as I tighten this up, I can start erasing some of this grid that I just spent all that time on, because once it's drawn, I don't really need it that much anymore. I'm not going to go to town and totally erase every little bit of it, because if I get revisions on this, if I get feedback coming back and it's like, hey, you need to, do this, that, or whatever. If I need to change this in any substantial way, I'll want that grid there. It is not the Washington Monument. This is actually a piece for the City Builder Kickstarter. It is supposed to just be an obelisk, essentially. It's supposed to look like a monument. Now I'm using my straight edge now that I'm tightening these up to make sure that they are actually straight. And this little monument will have the names of higher level backers on it. I know there's a $500 level backer, like backing level. And those names will be on here, but there's like the next tier down. I don't remember the dollar amount off the top of my head because I'm ill prepared. But if you look up the City Builder Platinum Edition Kickstarter from Skirmisher, which I will put a link to that in the description of this video when it's done and uploaded in archive. But yeah, you'll get your name on this cool monument if you do any of those higher level rewards, higher tier rewards. It says so right in the description which tiers it is. You get a bunch of other stuff too. This is just like one extra little perk, because I'm doing a whole bunch of new illustrations for this project. All the chapter headers, new chapter headers for the book. And this cool little bonus illustration. So now I'm tightening up these lines. I'm kind of cleaning up some of those sketchy lines where I wasn't entirely sure where my line was supposed to go. I'm just making this a little bit more defined so that when I get to the next step, I'm not like, wait, which line is the right one? And then following one of the not correct sketchy lines and ending up with a wonky looking monument. All right, before I get too technical in here, I actually have some detail I need to sketch in down in this area, because we do want it to look like it's all fancy and stuff. Oh, where's the middle? I'm going to use my smaller straight edge to figure out where the middle is. Where's the middle in something in perspective? You go from corner to corner again. Theoretically, this whole thing is in perspective, so this will get you the middle. Because math. Hooray, geometry. I probably would have gotten close if I had eyeballed it, but sometimes I just feel a little bit better if I
I actually make sure it's the middle instead of just giving it my best guess. I kind of have a shield shape in here now. This side, because this is in perspective and this side is my left-hand side is actually closer to us. So even though this is divided in half in perspective, this side is actually bigger than this side. This half, the left-hand half, is actually larger than the right-hand half. And so if I'm doing half of something in the middle there, that should actually be a little bit smaller. And you can go through and there's tricks to actually figuring out exactly like how big that should be, but that's a level of technical that I don't particularly care to get into, because I feel like you hit a point of diminishing returns there, when that's one thing where I can pretty well just eyeball it and say, yeah, that's probably close enough. This side is also going to have a little bit, so since it's like a carved relief, so you're going to see, you're seeing this side of all the objects, you're going to see this side of the relief of the little shield emblem, since this is supposed to be carved in stone. But yeah, Bryce, you're not my only friend that's planning on running away. I have another friend that's planning on moving to Scotland within the next year. So I'm like, man, I'm never going to know when to talk to anybody. I got to figure out this world clock business. Scotland, I discovered, is 5 hours ahead. We'll see if I remember that for more than, today when I first looked it up. All right. That's going to have an emblem on it. I'll get there in a second. I'm going to make sure that I have room for my lions. Because, yeah, that's right. Lions. Scotland would be fun. Yeah, he's been a couple of times. My friend Jeremy Flagg has been he's an author. He's been to Scotland a few times. We actually went to high school together, though. It's very random, but he's been to Scotland a few times and he absolutely loved it. And this last time he was like, screw it, I'm moving. And it's going to take him a while to get all his ducks in a row, but he is most certainly planning. And he has announced this like on social media. Hells yes, I'm going to move to Scotland. I mean it. So I'm not like breaking the news inappropriately here. He's stated his intentions for everyone. It's going to take him a little while to get everything together, but he's already started the process. Like he's already started his whole visa application process and everything. And he just came back from vacation like a week and a half ago. It's like, the time is now. Which, good on him. I appreciate the fact that he's just like, yep, I'm doing this, and just freaking going for it. That lion has a wonky arm. I'm going to shorten that up a little bit because that looks a little bit goofy. They're not exactly heraldry lions. I don't know how to do the adjective. I don't know how to pronounce the adjective version. They're not exactly like that. And there's some kind of greenery sprig here and a greenery sprig here. And another little greenery sprig down here, I think. We'll see how this works. Sprig. Sprig. I think I wanted a little something coming up here. Yeah, Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted. Not that this looks very much like any actual heraldry or Greek monument or anything. It's very much a fantasy pastiche of what that stuff should look like, which is fine for what we're doing. We're very often, for Skirmisher, we're very often doing things and trying to do this very, we spend a lot of time developing stuff for the coast setting, which is like a fantasy world Greece, fantasy world classical Greece, which, so then you spend so much time trying to make stuff look kind of Greek, and then every once in a while it's like, we're gonna expand outside of coast a little bit, so let's make things look, we're gonna do Egyptos, make things look ancient Egyptian. And then lately we've been working on Ragnarok, Age of Wolves, and the Great Winter, and it's like, okay, now make everything look very Vikings. And so we actually spend a lot of time working with Skirmisher, like working for Skirmisher. I spend a lot of time with very specific looks, and so it's not very often that it's just like, yeah, just make it like generic fantasy whatever. I actually spend a lot of time trying to make stuff look very accurate to a very specific kind of, or at least very evocative of a very specific time or place or whatever else, and not very often just doing, yeah, just like fantasy stuff. And City Builder is very much like, yeah, just generic high medieval fantasy type stuff. Oh, okay. I'm not used to being just let off the leash like that. It's kind of fun to get to do that for a change. It's also really fun developing fantasy stuff that is very specific. And it's like, we are only doing it in, like, we're evoking this very particular feel, and we want to try to use references and make it as close to that as we can. That can be really fun too, just in a different way. It's fun because then you come out with stuff that you wouldn't normally have come up with on your own, because it forces you to look up new and different things that you wouldn't necessarily have incorporated onto your art in the first place, because you never would have really thought to look for them. But when somebody's like, hey, I want it exactly this way, then you have to look up new stuff and broaden your horizons, which is cool. Getting all these little details in on this lion. I may very well end up light boxing this lion and these little greenery sprigs and just flipping them so that they look consistent, so that they're mirrored on this side. That might have to happen. Just because I would hate for them to be all wonky and not the same on both sides. That would frustrate me immensely. What time are we at now? Oh my goodness, it's 9:55 already. We're almost at time. We've gotten quite a bit done though, which is good. Should be able to get my little heraldry, herald. God, I can't with that word. My fancy decorative lion. There's my fancy decorative lion. And I'll tighten up these little sprigs near him too. You know what? This edge of this bottom pier is really driving me nuts. Because it's still all wonky and sketchy. So I'm just going to clean that up a little bit so it's not interfering with what I'm doing right above it. Better. All right. We'll tighten this up. So with these last couple of minutes that we have together before I hit 10 o'clock, I try to keep the streams to about an hour because goodness knows we've all got things to do and can only be on so many YouTube videos for so long. I'm just going to recommend, if you get a chance, check out this Kickstarter for the Platinum Edition of City Builder from Skirmisher Publishing. I'll probably do at least one more art stream involving what I'm working on for this project, just because it's something fun and different. It's a cool break from doing Age of Night stuff for you guys every week, which, as much as I enjoy doing that, it's just fun to have a change of pace. Not that I'm not working on those all the time off camera, just fun to mix it up for the art streams. So you'll probably see at least one more of these before the Kickstarter's done. But you should definitely check it out. It's a really awesome book. It's a really great resource, whether you're running games or writing games or just writing any kind of like fantasy or anything else where you have to create a world. It really just helps you consider things and populate your cities and other places where people are going to be in a lot more believable and richer ways than you would have maybe necessarily thought of on your own. I find having these little kind of like prompts and guides is really useful. So it's a really great resource for a lot of different people. Definitely check it out. And you're going to get some cool art by me, including this picture and several others. And it's already well more than funded, and most of the book's already done, so you know you're actually going to get it, and that's all great. Also, if you haven't stopped by here before, make sure to like my video and subscribe to the channel if you want to watch me draw again next week or get notified whenever I come out with other videos, because I do other pre-recorded and edited videos on occasion, not super often. Most of what I do on here is just art streams. Come hang out with me while I draw. That's not what I wanted to put there. Isn't going to fit. I'm going to have to noodle with that some more later. All right, so it's been about an hour, and I went from a blank sheet of paper to having, we're going to pull that camera back so you can kind of see what we've got at this point. Woo! There we go. That's a little, sorry if I'm making you seasick, but yeah, it's a slightly, you can kind of see it better now. Went from a blank sheet of paper to having everything roughed in and a good start on polished pencils to turn in for critique and moving forward on this piece. All came from my little rough sketch. We did some mathematical perspective. Had a great time. Thank you everyone for coming and hanging out with me, and I will see you guys next week.